Hello and welcome to the Monkey Business Podcast from Van Monkey. I'm your host, Adam Baker. Now it is a slightly different one this week, but I think you're going to enjoy it. This week I'm speaking to James Bolle, who started his own business, Purposeful, a few years ago after extensive experience in larger corporate companies. Now the idea of his company was to identify the purpose of a business and to try and build a positive culture to cultivate this success for the business. Now this idea of a positive work culture has never been so pertinent with widespread strikes in the public and private sector. James explains the process of building a positive culture and the benefits of it, but also how to look out for a negative one. But I'll let him tell you the rest. James Bolle, building culture in the workplace, and me.
So in 2019, I started my own company, Purposeful, to try and take that message out to some smaller and medium enterprise owners around the UK. This idea that if you're running your business with authentic values and for a reason where people can get excited about what they're doing and emotionally engaged, we can make your life easier as a business owner. We can make their life better as team members because they'll see, I'm doing something that matters. I'm making a difference in the world. What I found over the kind of 4 years that I've been running the business was that business owners don't talk about purpose. They often have a really clear purpose in themselves in terms of why they're doing it, and they don't wake up thinking I've got a problem with purpose or with values in my business. Yeah. But sometimes one of the things they'll talk about and one of the things they'll try and put their finger on is, the culture's not quite right in my business. And so I've started talking a bit more about culture than about purpose, because culture is how your values and how your purpose runs through the entire organisation and how everyone behaves. And so that's why I rebranded what I'm doing as the Culture Builder at the beginning of 2022, and why I kind of talk about culture now. But it is fundamental to a business's success, how they do everything. That's why I'm interested in helping businesses build that culture.
And so, talking about culture now, how important is it to build that culture, and what differences do you see between a company that does do that? Is it kind of like a before and after, I suppose?
Yeah, so most businesses don't kind of deliberately build a culture. One of the things, I'm often quoting other people that are much cleverer than me, and one of the things somebody much cleverer than me has said is, as soon as two people get together and start interacting, they begin to develop a culture, which is there are shared things that we find acceptable, there are things that we believe. We're completely different people, but there are things that we will have in common that we believe, and will behave based on those beliefs. And that will be, if Carl came back in here, we might have a different group culture than if there's just the two of us here. So as soon as people get together and start interacting, culture forms. What most business owners do is they have a business idea and they want to be their own boss, or they want to make loads of money, or they want to change the world. When they start getting people together, that culture begins to form. Necessarily, they can model good behaviour, but that culture begins to form on its own without their input. And depending on the people you've got in the room, the things you accept them doing, the values that you instill in them, the way you treat your customers, the way you treat your people, the things you incentivize them and measure them against, these things all contribute to the culture. And I'm sure you've worked in organisations where you felt like there's been a bad vibe or bad behaviour is tolerated. When people behave in ways that are negative, that's an indication of the culture not being right. There are some organisations where people can get away with not doing a good job. There are some organisations where you can lie to clients, and that's okay. There are some where I've worked with recruitment businesses where one recruitment consultant will go and steal candidates' CVs off another consultant's desk because it's all about personal achievement rather than kind of achieving as a team. And that's why it's so important, because you start your business, people come together, a culture develops, and before you know it, you've got a team of 5, 10, 20 people. There's all kinds of behaviours that you don't want to happen, all kinds of people having maybe negative experiences that they're not enjoying, and then that culture impacts on everything you do. If you don't have the right culture, it negatively affects your clients. If you don't have the right culture, it negatively affects the people that work there. And the culture is so important in keeping people engaged, keeping people loyal, keeping people happy, that I believe if you take steps to build it kind of deliberately from the beginning, you can weed out some of the negative things that might cause a big risk to your business in future and really build some positive stuff that keeps everyone happy, motivated, engaged. loyal, and ultimately means your customers are happy and your business can grow.
Yeah. And touching on that about how a culture can form without accidentally almost. So I read a piece where you talked about the old-fashioned notion of employee engagement.
Yeah.
So this is an active thing from an employer trying to, maybe they think they're changing the culture or trying to improve the life of their employees while they're at work.
Yeah.
Whereas it can actually be a negative thing. So what was your experience with that?
I mean, I have this might be a bit academic, but I have a problem with the words employee and the word engagement, because I don't believe that in 2023 people are comfortable just being an employee, just turning up and getting some money, and that's, you know, it's actually quite a Victorian relationship, 150 years old, and it's a bit out of date. I also don't like the idea of engagement, because the whole idea of employee engagement is you've got this team of people, you need to kind of buy their motivation, or you need to trick them into being more engaged. So you as the leader have to come in, be charismatic, and then engagement is something you bestow on them. It's like, I'm going to inspire you now. And I don't think it needs to be like that at all. Actually, engagement is intrinsic. Like, you come to work because you love elements of your job and there's something about it that deeply satisfies you. If you can connect somebody to that and show them how their unique gifts make a positive difference to your customers, to the world, then their motivation is going to be kind of inherent and within them anyway. And actually, kind of engagement initiatives like, oh, we're going to sign up, you know, there's going to be a fruit bowl in the office on a Monday, or we're going to go to Alton Towers at the end of the quarter, or whatever it might be, or, you know, you can get 20% off at the cafe down the road. That's all nice to have, but it's not going to affect how somebody intrinsically feels about their job. And so I think the role of the leader in the organisation is to try and build the conditions so that people can create their own engagement and their own satisfaction with their work. And if you think about, you know, how much better would the world be if everybody loved their jobs and felt like they were making a difference? Like, we'd be much happier.
I mean, especially for the amount of time that you spend at work. I mean, it's almost a third of your life, isn't it, really? So
loads and loads,
So for a small company, how important is it for them to build the culture compared to a larger company? Is there a difference in the way that you do that, or is it the same, it's just a scale thing? Or
So culture is a really interesting thing to think about in this case, because culture can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. And like, you read all these case studies about why did Netflix succeed? Oh, it had a great culture. Why did Enron fail? Oh, it had a terrible culture. Like, actually, culture is just what people praise or blame when things go right or wrong a lot of the time. The truth is, in an organisation, there will be multiple cultures going on at once. So, you know, in a company that's got 2 offices, there'll be 2 different cultures. In a company that's got 5 teams, there'll be 5 slightly different cultures. So obviously, the bigger the organisation, the more complex that gets. So I'd say it's kind of more difficult for a larger organisation. But even in a smaller organisation, the way the salespeople behave out on the road versus the way the admin team behave in the office could be 2 completely different cultures. And the reason why it's important to bring that together is so that your customers get kind of a unified view of what it's like working with you. So they get the same experience when they're being sold to as when they're getting their invoices, when they're being serviced by the customer service team, or whatever department they're interacting with. And everybody feels like, as I say, they're using their unique gifts to do different jobs, but they're all pulling together as part of a whole. Now, it's quite complex. It doesn't necessarily have to be difficult to build a great culture in an organisation, but you do need to be aware of the fact that, you know, as soon as people are sitting in different offices or in different teams, it does get a little bit more different, because they'll have different cultures themselves.
And do you think this is something that's always existed, always been thought about? Is this, you know, 50 years ago were the companies that were already doing this, or is it something that we're only cottoning onto now?
That's a really interesting question, and the honest answer is I don't really know. But when you look back at, you know, it's kind of the way we work today, the foundations of what we do were kind of built in the Industrial Revolution, where you needed people to operate machines, and you just needed the people to be in the place and doing the right the right job. And I actually think that 150 years ago, a lot of organisations didn't care about their people. They'd be having arms ripped off in looms or whatever they would be doing. But there were some organisations back then, maybe more driven by religious principles than by economic ones. So thinking about the Quaker companies like Cadbury, where they built an estate. All of their workers should live somewhere clean with access to a garden large enough to grow a fruit tree if they wanted, with great communal facilities. Obviously that benefited the company and benefited them, but that was driven by their religious beliefs. But that is, I think, really similar to what you might have seen Google doing 10 years ago with the beanbags and the pool tables and the slides in the office. It's kind of just a modern equivalent. I think people have always been interested in this idea of how can we ensure that people are happy, healthy and productive at work. It's just over time how people have tried to do that and what it's looked like, I think, has changed. Now, I think today it's probably heightened, partly by social media, partly by the access to information about other companies and so on. You'll read a lot about, you used to read about millennials and then you read about Gen Z or Zoomers or whatever they're called now. And this idea that people coming into the workforce now at the age of 16, 18, 20, 21 aren't prepared to accept anymore that they need to turn up to a physical building, do 8 hours work and then go home and then be happy that they've got a paycheck. They want to feel more involved, more engaged. I don't think it's true. I'm nearly 44. I don't want to turn up and do a job that I know is complete nonsense. I want to feel like I'm making a difference in the world. I know people in their 60s that want to make a difference. So I don't think it's just Gen Z coming into the office that's making culture and workplace well-being and all that kind of stuff more important, but definitely they are more comfortable, more confident talking about it than my generation was and the generation before. So I think it's always been there. I think the trends in how you deal with it have been changing over time. I think it is probably becoming something that people are talking about more, but I think it's always been there in the background.
And speaking about talking about things more, that with especially my generation and maybe people slightly younger than me, talking about things that didn't used to be spoken about is a hot topic, and that's mental health is probably one of the main topics. And how do you think that links to having a culture at work?
So I think a lot of the research, when Google ran the research on their highest performing teams, the single biggest thing that they found differentiated their best teams from the worst performing teams was a sense of inclusivity and psychological safety was the term that was coined to describe it. This idea that you could be yourself, you could bring your whole self to work, and if you've got a problem at home or you're stressed by your work, you can talk about it and you won't be negatively marked by your boss because of that. And it's gained a lot of prominence kind of over the years coming. But I think good mental health, there's lots of evidence that suggests that good mental health comes from feeling like you are making a contribution, you're making a difference, and you are valued as a person. And I think having meaningful work is actually a fundamental part of good mental health. Now, obviously, there's been lots of examples in the past of cultures that have not allowed people to speak up. So one of the famous case studies is Nokia, where they had a very kind of positive can-do culture, but that meant that over time, junior team members were frightened to bring bad news to senior team members. They were frightened to challenge each other, and so their product development suffered, and they fell, when the smartphone revolution happened, Nokia really fell behind because, just down the company, people didn't want to hear bad news because you always had to be positive. You can imagine how that kind of good vibes only, good news only culture might also affect somebody's mental health and the feeling that they're able to talk about it. There'll be different cultures will allow different things and different behaviours will be tolerated. I would suggest that if you are trying to deliberately build a culture today, you need to make sure that it's one where people feel safe to be vulnerable, feel safe to talk about their feelings. That doesn't mean doesn't mean that if you're in an office of 20 people that somebody can stop everyone else working and cry at their desk and have a breakdown. You might want a private way of dealing with that, but that person who's under stress or suffering with whatever it might be has to be able to bring those emotions to work and feel welcome and like they belong, with whatever those feelings are.
and you mentioned Google, obviously an American company. Are there other countries that you look at and think they've got this better than we have in the UK, or they've started thinking about it more extensively than we have in the UK?
Not particularly, actually, no. And one of the things that really winds me up when I listen to podcasts and watch things is when the person speaking, all their examples is Apple, Tesla, Netflix, Google. It's like, I don't care about those big companies because, yes, Google can afford to build a skyscraper with slides all the way through it. I can't do that in my business.
Yeah.
But you look at the just released, the Scottish business minister has just released a report saying that they are going to start including social purpose metrics. They're going to start giving small businesses purpose training and how to find purpose in their work. They're going to build a kind of Scottish Purpose Maturity Index. Mm-hmm. Scotland is a country where the government has decided that economic output is not the only way they're going to measure their success. They're also going to look at quality of life, and they're going to start trying to encourage businesses to think about social value a lot more than we do in England. So looking to Scotland, you think, okay, that's good. But you look across Europe, you look across the UK, there are all kinds of organisations doing great things with their culture, and all kinds of organisations thinking about how they can do things differently. So you think about the B Corp movement, so benefit corporations, organisations that are proving that they have a commitment to their people and their communities alongside making money. I think it's a trend that's really positive in the West Midlands and in the UK in general. So no, I don't look jealously at other countries. Yeah. There's probably, if I was a psychologist, I'd probably talk about how national culture can impact on company culture, but I'd be out of my depth if I started talking about that, so I'm not going to, if that's all right.
Well, I mean, the only reason I ask is obviously at the moment we're seeing a lot of striking in the public and private sector as well. Probably the private sector is reported on less than the public sector. Yeah. So a lot of those strikes have been linked to pay, but also working conditions. Yeah. So how do you think culture and pay working conditions and pay feature in culture?
So culture is the way your organisation does stuff, does anything. Mm-hmm. And one of my colleagues always used the really interesting statement that the way the worst behaviour you tolerate is what your company culture is. So the way you do all these things contributes to your culture. Now, in an organisation, I think you have to look at 5 things. You need to look at the basics of the job. You know, do people feel psychologically safe? Are they physically safe? Do they get paid enough to live with dignity? Mm-hmm. And that's where I think a lot of the working conditions, particularly in the public sector, come under scrutiny. You know, where you look at nurses having, I don't know the statistics, so nurses having a real terms pay cut 10 years in a row. Mm-hmm. Train drivers being asked to do 2 jobs and they're worried about the safety of the passengers. These things are fundamental, and if you don't have those basics in place, people can't be happy to do their job. Mm-hmm. The basics is kind of like a hygiene factor. You can't make somebody twice as satisfied by paying them twice as much, mm-hmm. but you can destroy somebody's happiness at work and your company culture by not paying anybody enough. So if it's absent, it's a disaster. But there's also lots of research saying once you earn about £40,000, getting more money doesn't really make you that much more satisfied, and that amount of money will change over time. But money doesn't drive happiness. But then there are things like, do you feel connected with the people around you? Do you have the autonomy to do the job where, how, when you want? Are you getting better at it? And lastly, purpose. Does it matter? These things make a huge difference in people's satisfaction at work. Mm. I don't think anybody's ever gone on strike because they're like, I don't see how the job I'm doing improves society. Yeah. But if the basics are missing, that's when people will take a stand and say, no, I can't do this anymore. But the way you as a company deal with the basics mm-hmm. says as much about you and your culture as the way you let people work from home, or how you help develop them, or how you encourage them to be connected to their customers and the people around them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that culture is intrinsically linked to pay and working conditions, but I think pay and working conditions probably reflect the culture of those organisations rather than the other way around. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, Because I mean, I was speaking to my mum about this, and she used to work at a high street retailer, which I won't name, but they used to supply. Well, there'd be dentists that would come in, and hairdressers and cooks, and all those different things for the employees while they were there to just. I mean, partially it meant that the employees didn't have to all book a dentist appointment and then have time off, but still it felt like a positive thing.
Yeah.
But that no longer happens. Is that something that you've seen quite a lot? Is it something? Do you see any of those in companies these days? And do you think what the effect of that is, basically?
I mean, that's a really interesting question. So this is probably going back 10 years now, I went to a meeting at a northern supermarket head office.
Right, okay.
And we went into the meeting room and there was hair all over the table. And the guy we were meeting said, "Oh, sorry, like we have a barber comes in every Tuesday lunchtime and uses this room as as a barber's."
Yeah.
And so clearly, the barber had just left and we came in for the meeting. There was still hair all over the place. And I'm like, that's one of the weirdest meetings I've ever had. We're kind of brushing hair off the table so you can sit down and talk. But yes, that keeps people in the office longer, and so there's a part of the company wanting to do that. But I think one of the shifts that's been really interesting here is as companies get run more and more for profit. So you look at some high street retailers like Boots PLC, was taken private by KKR and Stefano Pessina. The more these companies are run for profit and short-term profit is seen as the thing that you need to drive, the more these types of services are cut, because there's not a tangible immediate benefit of having a dentist in-house.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a cost. And somebody somewhere will have made the argument of, well, okay, we lose 100 hours a week on average because people are booking dentist appointments and going away. So this dentist costs us £1,000. So 100 hours versus £1,000. If we pay people more than £10 an hour, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Or less than £10 an hour, it's not worth it. And that decision is made on a spreadsheet. But there are organisations where their primary goal is to encourage great relationships, or their primary goal is to provide great employment opportunities, where the discussion is somewhat different. But the last 50 years, business orthodoxy that has been taught in business schools and has been pushed, this idea of shareholder capitalism, we need to make as much money as possible because making money for the shareholders is what matters. These types of things will be stripped out because they're seen more as costs than as tangible benefits. I'm sure that it will swing back the other way over time, and particularly as the way people work, maybe more from home and more remotely, happens. When you come into the office, there's got to be more there to keep you there. And so I suspect over the next few years we'll see more in-house services like that coming back in as well, because it's come to the office, collaborate, have your meetings. Oh, and there's going to be a masseur here today, and if you need to get your teeth checked, we've got a dentist once a month. Particularly as companies begin to share office space and co-work a lot more, I do suspect that will happen. But the truth is, if you said to me, if we worked together, if you're a small business owner, and everyone in the business, what really motivates them is, we're making as much money as possible, because what's really important is, we're helping our team buy their first homes. We're helping people have fantastic home lives, because it's all about maximising the money we make so that people can make personal choices in their lives. Right? Okay, well, don't spend money on an in-house dentist then.
Yeah.
Because it is a cost, and you can maximise, you can save that cost. And if your goal is to spread that money back out within the team because you pay great bonuses or pay really well, and then they can make choices in their private lives, don't lay on any of those costs. It doesn't make any sense at all. But there will be organisations that it does make sense for, where it's about being a family maybe, or supporting each other or things like that. And I think it really will depend on the organisations.
And do you think at the moment, especially when we're seeing striking, that's normally companies, I don't want to say dictatorship, but companies dictating the terms to employees rather than, I know employees, I don't know what term to use other than employees, but rather than employees being asked for the terms that they would like. Do you think, as you mentioned, things will swing the other way? Do you think that's the thing that swings?
I don't know. I don't know is the honest answer to that. I mean, Paul McCartney from the Beatles always said the best bands were benevolent dictatorships.
Yeah.
And I think if you've got a benevolent dictator, it's kind of fine. The reason why I don't like the word employee is because it implies a power. Power resides with the company, and you're just employed by the company. And I think that relationship works best when it is completely equal. And the truth is, when I work with businesses, one of the first things I do is I talk to team members and listen to them and make a list of all of the complaints that they have. Complaints might be a bit strong, but the things they're worried about, the things they don't like, things that don't feel right in the business. And then we'll go on to look at kind of what the values of the organisation and what's its purpose. And when you go back to the complaints that they gave at the beginning, the complaints are normally places where the company has not lived up to the values that are important to the people within it. And those values can become important to the team members without the company getting involved at all. Now, I'm not an expert on nursing or on postal workers or whatever, but there is something in the contract that the nurses have made with the NHS or the mail workers have made with Royal Mail. There's something in the values there that the company is not living up to make them feel like they need to take that decision. And if you think about it in an organisation, a smallish organisation that's not striking, we're not kind of at the point where people are going to down tools because they're so dissatisfied. I'm thinking about somebody I worked with recently. This bonus scheme is unfair. I hate the bonus scheme. The boss is saying, well, the bonus scheme exists because I need you to contribute this much money to the business, or the business doesn't make any money. But underlying all of this, we always say our client's the most important thing. You always go above and beyond for your clients. The bonus scheme is saying you don't have time to go above and beyond for the clients because you need to do as much work as quickly as possible.
Right.
And so actually when people are complaining about the bonus scheme, it's not we need more money, we're greedy, it's all about the money. It's we thought that it was really important to do the best job we can for our clients. You've created this system that penalises us for doing that. That's not fair. And that's what I think about in a small business is, what are people complaining about, and what does that say about where the company isn't living up to its side of the bargain? Now, for striking workers, there's a big bit missing. For most small companies, it's not going to be that. It's going to be a series of small pieces. But that would be one of my pieces of advice for anyone listening is go and talk to your team, and don't be defensive. Just listen. If somebody says, the bonus scheme's rubbish, it's like, don't try and justify the bonus scheme. Just listen to them, and then have a think about what all the complaints actually mean. Again, somebody much more clever than me said, people talk about meaning at work all the time. It's just if you're not listening properly, it can sound like complaining.
Right.
And those complaints are actually a really rich source of you understanding where you as a leader are not living up to the values of your organisation, if you listen properly.
So, how do you build a culture then?
So, as I say, it's complex, but it doesn't necessarily have to be difficult. So, from what I've seen in 20 years working in these big organisations and 4 years working with a range of smaller businesses and actually implementing this, the key thing is to build on the right foundations. The metaphor I always use is if you're building a house, you can't just wander into a field and start putting bricks up. You need to build the foundations or everything's going to fall down. And those foundations are understanding your values and your purpose. And it doesn't mean not every company in the world, it's fine to make money, not every company in the world needs to be trying to save the whales or end environmental degradation or whatever it is. It can be about the difference you make in the lives of your customers, the difference you make in the lives of your people. It can be anything, but it's really important to be in touch with what it is that your business stands for beyond just making money and getting a new car for the owner, or getting the owner's kids through university or whatever the underlying financial motivation is. And it's about what are the values that we can all buy into, like how do we all behave, what are the things we all believe in, and then you build on top of that. And the order I think you need to do it in is, first of all, you need to look at your company strategy, and is that aligned with your values and your purpose? Then you need to look at what you're measuring in the business and how you measure success and how you incentivize people, because nothing changes people's behaviour more than saying, do you know what, all that matters is new sales. We say we're all about fostering a sense of community, but this year it's all about how much we've sold. So forget all that, we're just going to go and focus on selling.
Yeah.
So you need to measure the right things and incentivize the right things, and once you've got those things in place, then you can look at how you treat your people, then you can look at how you treat your customers, then you can look at the systems and processes you've got in place to reinforce the living the values through those things. And that's absolutely, they've never done it deliberately, but all of the successful businesses I've ever worked with have ended up at that point where their employee experience, team member experience, their customer experience, their strategy, what they measure, and the processes they've got in place to support all that, it's all perfectly aligned with what everyone thinks the values are.
Right.
And that's how you build a great culture. Now, on top of that, you've got to find the bad behaviours, and you've got to stand up against them.
Yeah.
Because nothing will undermine anything more than saying, well, okay, we know this guy's an idiot, but he sold more than anyone else last year, so we're going to let him carry on being an idiot.
Right. Yeah.
You've got to stop the behaviours that obviously go against the values. But that's how I would work with a business to try and build that culture. And it's not a quick fix. Like if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure about my organisational culture, people aren't trying hard enough, people are leaving, people don't seem to be happy, you can't click your fingers and change it overnight. But if you can get in touch with those values and build on top of them, over time you can really affect the behaviour of people. And that's kind of, I think it goes back to a question you asked earlier, like, because the way people behave is based on their values and their beliefs, you can't change what someone believes about their job by getting them a perk box or by bringing fruit to the office. You can't change the way someone feels and believes about their job by taking them to Alton Towers once a quarter. You have to get deep into what it is that people believe about their job and interact with them on that level in order to effectively change their behaviour and change the culture. And there's lots of things you can do about that. What are the stories that you tell that demonstrate the good things in the organisation? How are decisions made? Who's got the power? And how do you communicate those decisions? What are the symbols of success in the organisation?
Yeah.
All of these things can contribute to it, and you can make simple changes. But ultimately, you've got to do things that change how people feel and believe about the job that they're doing if you want to change that culture.
So for a business owner, what are the telltale signs that there's something wrong with the culture of the company?
Oh, that's an amazing question, because it means I can plug my Culture Killers checklist.
Go ahead.
So I've got a list of on my website, theculturebuilder.com. There's a download for the Culture Killers where there are 26 things that I've seen small business owners do that negatively affect culture that they might not realise they're doing. Right. So go there and do that. But more importantly, I think you have a problem with your culture if you have lots of unexplained short-term absences.
Yeah.
If the work people deliver doesn't meet your expectations, if there's a real mismatch between what you think you're asking for and what people think is okay to deliver, you've got a problem with your culture. If teams are arguing against each other, or people are arguing against each other rather than working together for the customer and for the organisation, you've got a problem with your culture. And if people are leaving quickly after they've joined, you've got a problem with your culture. Those are the symptoms that I think will indicate there's a cultural problem. Often when I speak to business owners, the things that they are concerned about is, I just can't find the right people. I'm worried that, for example, Adam's going to leave because he's really good and I'll never be able to replace him. I can't take time off because I need to check in to make sure the work's being done or that it's being done to the right standard.
Yeah.
And I'm losing loads of weekends and evenings because I'm having to redo or check work that people have done. Those are the things that, don't have to be true. If you have the right culture and the right people in the business, those things don't have to be true, and you can change those things. So those are the symptoms you'd look out for.
And at the moment, just to switch a little, So we're seeing a lot of Elon Musk is a prime example. Ego at the top of businesses.
Yeah.
And do you think that's a poor role model for business owners? Do you think that has had an effect?
I'm not sure. Well, it's interesting because Tesla is always taken as a case study of a real purpose-led brand that's a real success story. So if you think about Tesla, they've always said that their purpose is accelerating the world's transition to renewable energy. Mm-hmm. So Tesla is a alternative energy source battery manufacturer. They just happened to decide that the best way to get that renewable energy into society was through luxury high-end electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. You know, they were also putting Tesla batteries in houses and trucks and doing rockets and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Tesla was always held up as a massive success for that reason. With this Elon Musk in the organisation potentially as a bit of a wild card, not necessarily doing best practice, but inspiring people around the mission and inspiring people to work hard. And you often find this with entrepreneurs. They're successful in a business, and that feeling of what it was like when they went from 100 to 1,000 people, when they get to 10,000 people, they're like, well, why is employee 10,000 not working like employee number 3 was? And it's like, because it's a completely different experience when you're at 10,000 rather than at 3 or whatever it is. But they're often trying to get back to that feeling of, I loved it when I was a scrappy little startup and now we're a big company and we've got bureaucracy. I hate everything.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think that's probably what has happened at Twitter is, Elon Musk says, well, I have a playbook that worked when I grew SpaceX, when I grew Tesla, when I grew my other businesses. Mm-hmm. I need to run that at Twitter. I can't run it in this big organisation, so I need to cut everybody and get back to that scrappy startup phase, and then I can run the playbook effectively. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't. Yeah, as I say, any group of people has an existing culture, and you can't just come in and crack it in half with an axe. You have to understand it. And one of the phrases that one of my old CEOs always used to use was that culture eats strategy for breakfast. It doesn't really matter what your strategy is and how good it is. The existing culture will kind of destroy that strategy because behaviours persist because they're based on beliefs. Yeah. And you can't change somebody's beliefs by coming in and saying, answer yes to this email if you're prepared to work 60 hours a week or you're fired. Like that doesn't work. No. I don't think anybody's looking at Elon Musk today and saying he's the leader I want to be like. Yeah. Maybe they were 3 years ago. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I don't think that Elon Musk is kind of making a big difference to leadership practices today. And that's one of the things that I find frustrating that I mentioned before is Elon Musk is the guy who's held up as this is what an entrepreneur looks like. Yeah. Or Richard Branson or Steve Jobs. It's like, where are the Carl Smiths in this? Particularly in the UK, half of the people in the UK work for small, medium enterprises. That is, and most of them actually for really small businesses where 10 or fewer team members. 99% of the businesses in the UK are small businesses. Those business owners are the ones we should be looking to because they know how to do it. The person who runs has run the barbers on the high street for 15 years, the person who runs the successful nail salon, the person who runs the commercial vehicle sales and leasing company, they're the ones that we should look to for how they're building the culture and building their businesses sustainably rather than the multi-billionaires. Yeah.
Well, I think the only other thing I was going to say was that the first thing that I saw on your website was earn more, work less, live happier. Yeah. So the implication of that being we aren't doing that at the moment, or the majority of us aren't doing that at the moment. So do you think there's anything, well, you mentioned Scotland before, so what kind of legislation could help all the myriad of small businesses that we have in the UK, could help them follow that, or people who are thinking of starting their own business, or might be a bit daunted by the prospect of it?
That's a good question, and I do not know what the answer is in terms of legislation. Mm-hmm. If I did, I would probably be in a different career trying to push that. But I think that in business schools, for 50 years, people have been taught you can measure profit, you can measure turnover, your duty as a business owner is to make that profit, and you'll pay your tax, and that's your contribution to society. Or you have shareholders, and giving them the money is your legal duty.
Yeah.
That's probably what needs to change, is that when you start a limited company or a partnership or whatever it is, you have a duty not just to return money to the directors, the owners of the business, but you also have a duty to look after your team members and the community that you operate in. I think you have a duty of care to society for running the business, and that is, I think, where we can make a huge difference, is in holding up, as examples, people that are doing that brilliantly. Now, I mean, I talk about earning more, working less, and living happier, because most business owners I know would like to work less and they'd like to earn more, and if you can do both at the same time, they'll be happy, and so they'll live happier. But I actually think that if you can get your organisational culture right, if you can build the conditions for your culture to thrive, yes, you'll have to work less because the work will be better, you'll have to replace people less often, they'll be more engaged, more motivated, more productive. So yeah, you'll work less because you'll have to chivvy them along more and redo their work, chivvy them along less and redo their work less. You'll earn more because the work they'll do will be better, and your business will grow because customers will be happier. But actually everybody in that business will have better lives because they can be engaged in the organisation that they're working in. And it's the research of Teresa Amabile from Harvard University, and she wrote a book on this called The Progress Principle, and her a very crude summary of that book is people are happiest in life when they can feel like they're making progress on something that matters.
Yeah.
And if you as a business owner will make more progress on something that matters to you, if you can help your people see that they're making progress on something that matters to them, if you can bring that all together into your organisation and build a culture around it, you will build a successful organisation, because that's what the big brands have done, maybe not deliberately, but that's what they've done over the years. If you can do that, you will make a really positive contribution to everybody's lives, not just get enough money to pay your credit card off, or pay your school fees, or whatever your financial goals are, and the world will be better. And so that is, that's the promise behind work less, earn more, live happier, is, you can have some of your time back to do things that you love, spend time with your family, whatever it is. Yep, you can earn more money so that you can do more fun things, but everyone here is going to be happier, and that is your legacy for future generations. If that makes sense.
It does, and that feels like quite a good place to end as well.
Well, thank you for
looking
asking
positively
me.
for the future.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. I didn't expect all those questions, but
Well,
I quite enjoyed them.
Okay, well, so did I. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to me.
No, cheers, Adam. That's great.
Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. I found it quite enlightening, and I think it's really important for business owners to consider what their culture is within their business, and to really set some time aside to think how it could be improved. If it could be improved, could be great already. Now, if you'd like some help in doing that, you can get in touch with James. I'll put the link to his website in the bio. In the meantime, there are some very helpful guides and information on his website too. That's Purposeful, PRPSFL. So, thank you for watching or listening, however you received this information. I'm Adam from Van Monkey. This is the Monkey Business Podcast, and we'll see you next time.